Good evening. Today, we will have the great Mongol Emperor Genghis Khan adopt you as his child. You will be heir to his throne, or duke in his territory, or his daughter married away as strategic alliance to rule another kingdom. If this little midnight time travel teaches you something, please toss a subscribe if you haven't already done it. And tell me in the comments what part of the world you are from, so the rest of the world can wish you a good night's sleep. I hope you truly love the stories I share with you all here. Now, turn down the lights, draw the curtains shut, slide into your sheets, and let's begin. You wake to the sound of leather creaking and wind pulling at felt, which is somehow both a lullaby and a subpoena. You're in what the Mongols call jur. You might know them as yurt, or a Mongolian hut, but in reality, it is a portable empire, and outside, horses are eating the horizon like they own it, because they do, and so do you, allegedly. Because you, the lucky one, have been adopted into the family group chat of Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan, where scene receipts are carved into territories and sibling rivalry is mapped with cavalry. Think succession drama, but with more archery and significantly fewer non-disclosure agreements. Your first calendar invite? A meeting that could have been a raid. We'll circle back to that meeting, because on the step, everything is a meeting that could have been a raid. Let's get you oriented. Early 13th century, Big Sky, Mongolia. It smells like horses, fermented mare's milk, and ambition. Textures? Felt under your fingers, grit in your teeth. A bowstring like a nerve, stretched to decisive consequences. The soundtrack. Hooves like drums, wind like a whisper, and the occasional shout of a courier who just arrived from 1,000 miles away with a message that can be summarized as, "We own that now." The HR department is called the Yasa, and compliance is enforced at arrow tips. You want work-life balance? Great news. The work is conquest, and life is also conquest. Balanced. And here's the core tension. The most feared conqueror in history is also a dad with a logistics plan. On the one hand, rivers of cavalry. On the other hand, chore charts. On Mondays, we take Bukhara. On Tuesdays, we practice handwriting, which is to say we force entire cultures to acknowledge new administrative scripts. The modern comparison? Imagine you're born into a startup whose product is empire. Your dad is the CEO, investor, janitor, and your equity refresh literally includes new provinces. But there's a catch. There's always a catch. You are a son, a daughter, or a politically weaponized in-law of Genghis Khan, and your life is a case study in how to build a dynasty that gallops. We're focusing on the children, which means we start with the daughters, because if you're waiting for a medieval patriarchy punchline, you'll be waiting a long time. The punchline rode past you an hour ago and just took 3 castles using a calm tone and a spreadsheet. Scholars call it the daughter strategy. Genghis marries his daughters to neighboring rulers, then helpfully drafts the new husbands into the Mongol army, which means the daughters end up running the home territories, cash flows, and entire frontier gates. Cute? No. Devastatingly effective? Yes. It's mergers and acquisitions. But the M stands for marriage, the A stands for annexation, and the paperwork is done on horseback. Picture yourself as Alakai Beki, married to the Ongud. Your wedding gift? A border to govern and a husband whose calendar is suddenly all-day event, campaign season. You're managing grain, tribute, and the quiet art of ensuring caravans don't mysteriously stop at your borders. You carry a dagger because it's stylish, but more importantly, you carry authority because your father weaponized kinship. When you hold court, your sleeves smell faintly of smoke and dairy, your guards smell faintly of murder and loyalty, and your eyes, according to 3 terrified emissaries, smell faintly of "do not test her." In your ledger, taxes collected, karash executed, bandits disassembled into metaphors. In your gut, a steady burn that says you're part of something planetary and precarious. You're a node in a network of stepwomen who govern while the men count corpses elsewhere. The latest gossip: someone's husband has not texted in months because he's been assigned to the Khan's professional development program, which involves catapults. You offer the correct condolences. May his aim be true. You mean it. Chechigan, another daughter, binds the Oirat. Her marriage comes with winter roads and complex fealties. It is a technical low-oxygen job. More snow, fewer harvests, and a demographic chart that looks like a cliff. But the math works out because Mongol governance under daughters is agile, ruthless, and obsessed with logistics. The modern analogy is an ops team that drinks kumis and tracks KPIs with carved tally sticks: caravan throughput, cattle reproduction rate, number of nobles who require attitude alignment. On the steppe, the phrase cross-functional means you can raise a levy, mediate a clan feud, and personally ride down an assassin before breakfast. The fog of breath, the silver of frost, the cold that turns your thoughts into beads, all standard. But you also keep a warm tent where scribes recalibrate the world in ink, because it turns out that organization is sexier than poetry when the empire needs feeding. The technical term might be governance. The practical term is, don't make me come down there. Another daughter, Al-Altun, wedded into Uyghur circles where scripts bloom like gardens, becomes a conduit for literacy and grain. The Uyghur script mainstreams into Mongol administration the way a productivity app hits your team. First timid, then everywhere, then baked into your personality. You sign orders with a mark that rearranges entire economies, and when a merchant prince blinks at your authority, you remind him, gently, that your father's cavalry can do a same-day delivery of compliance. He nods. He has heard of your father's flexible returns policy. You will notice the pattern. Daughters rule fixed places. Sons rule moving ones. The empire is both a web and a whip. Marriages are not romantic comedies, unless your idea of romance involves tax audits and dismembered coalitions. Genghis's marriages for his daughters are forward bases, disguised as weddings. The dowries are horses, falcons, and the right to tell a prince that his calendar has been reassigned. The toasts are brief. The mother-in-law jokes? Non-existent, unless the punchline is a siege tower. Now slide around the Jur to the sons, who all learn to ride before they learn to walk. Jochi, the eldest, carries the faint musk of scandal, a paternity question that Mongol sources treat like a smoking coal. Acknowledged, handled, not allowed to burn the furniture. Genghis calls him son. The army calls him terrifying. Jochi's main love language is distance. Specifically, he falls in love with distances so far they bend the world. West, always west, where the grass becomes a rumor and the Volga runs like a vein. Your saddle is your office. Your personnel reviews are conducted at a full gallop. Your most frequent managerial phrase is, break formation only when breaking nations. People say your arrows curve like decisions. You suspect they're just afraid to admit you have excellent form. Chagatai, second son, runs his world like a legal department that learned to sword fight. He's head of policy, sharp on rules, sharp on precedent, sharper on cutting through excuses. People push his buttons exactly once. He has an admirable refusal to sign off on nonsense. The yassa lives in his bones. He builds a khanate where caravans move like blood cells, and the body politic remains suspiciously healthy. He is not cuddly. He is effective. If you need a compliance training that comes with cavalry, call Chagatai. Ogadai, the third, inherits the big chair and the bigger migraine. Imagine taking the CEO role from your dad, whose primary performance metric was conquer everything. You pour wine, sometimes too generously, and build cities, always generously. Karakoram becomes an empire's inbox. Merchants, priests, secretaries, mechanics, and a paranoid number of falcons. You are a gatherer of people and, occasionally, of vices. Your reign is expansion with a side of administration. You receive delegations with eyes like coins. You pour another drink and sign another decree. Your hands smell like ink and fermented decisions. Were you the best at battle? Maybe not. Were you the best at scale? Quite possibly. You're good at hiring terrifying people who, blessedly, like you, Tolui, the youngest, is the hammer. He does not bring problems. He brings solutions that look like winter campaigns and end like new borders. His wife, Sorkoktani Beki, remember this name, will whisper it reverently in a minute, will later orchestrate the unimaginable. 4 sons who define continents. But for now, Tolui is manna from the war gods. He tests siege engines with the curious joy of a child discovering a new toy, except the toy is an innovation that converts stubborn cities into precedent. He dies too soon. The empire flinches. Pause the montage. Return to the daughters. You step back into their tents, quieter than a battlefield, louder than a monastery. They're running an empire's second brain. Supply lines, diplomacy, the art of letting enemies imagine they're safe for exactly 1 season too long. These women host envoys from China, Persia, the steppes beyond, religion and law, and salt and intelligence swirling in a soup that smells like stewed mutton and history. They're pragmatic monotheists when it helps, cheerful pluralists when it pays, and devout adherents to a single holy scripture called What Works. They know the difference between scandal and rumor, and they can turn either into leverage. They did not get a mentorship program. They got an empire. Let's detail the mechanism, step by step, because the technical term might be dynastic policy, but the practical term was ops manual. Step 1. Identify frontier polities with strategic rivers and markets. Draw circles around the tribes whose feuds you can monetize. Attach family bonds like rope bridges. Marry a daughter in, but insist that the new husband spends quality time on the front lines. Enrolled in dad's leadership expedition. Step 2. Staff the daughter's court with loyalists who owe her breath. Place scribes who can write in local scripts and in the script of power. Appoint advisors who can feed 300 horses with 200 sacks of grain, a prayer, and a glint. Pay them in silver and fear. Step 3. Reroute caravans through the new in-law territory. Build a customs regime that feels like a favor and acts like a vacuum. If bandits appear, they become a line item. If a noble balks, he becomes an anecdote. Step 4. Convert stability into taxes. Taxes into horses. Horses into letters. Letters into obedience. Keep the temple open, the market sweet, the roads policed, and the envoys fed. Remind everyone that worship is free, but rebellion is very expensive. Offer discounts for early compliance. Step 5. When your husband returns from campaign, let him brag, smile, serve him stew. Then place a crisp memo in his hands. Here's what we acquired while you were away. 3 villages, a mayor's spine, and an immaculately balanced budget. Please initial. He will love you or fear you. Either is correct. Why did it matter? Because the steppe had discovered the cheat code for empire. Mobility meets management. Cavalry can take, spreadsheets can keep. Genghis's innovation wasn't just the arrow storm. It was a domestic policy. Make daughters queens of frontier hinges, and sons shock troops of expansion. If you want a modern comparison, consider a multinational that actually trusts regional directors, forks them equity in success, and then sends their spouses to do brand ambassadorship on a different continent where they accidentally rearranged the GDP. It sounds absurd. It worked for half the known world. Religion? The family practiced a polyglot tolerance that would make modern HR draft a handbook and then look around at all the very sharp swords and decide the handbook is advisory. Nestorian Christians in Uyghur courts, Buddhists at Karakoram, Muslims in Khwarazm, Tengri hovering above them all like a sky-wide blue memo. The family motto might as well be, communicate with gods as needed. Do not antagonize clergy unnecessarily. Do antagonize anyone who interrupts revenue. Ironically, this flexible approach to divinity made conversion to Mongol rule easier. People like keeping their festivals. People like not being beheaded for incense. Scandals? Of course. This is a dynasty, not a monastery. There were feuds about who was born first, who was born legitimate, who was born annoying. There were sons who glared at one another across provinces, daughters whose marriages rearranged stock markets, and in-laws who believed their own press releases until a Mongol audit revised them into footnotes. The archive of human pettiness remained robust, and yet it is hard to sustain a clean scandal when your family's daily commute is 1,000 miles and everyone you dislike ends up as a Khan of something. The technical term is managed dysfunction. The practical term is do not bring your grievances to the tent unless your grievance can bring profits. Let's come to the daughters-in-law, especially Sorkoktani Beki, as promised. You step into her tent and realize you're in a different weather system. Quiet, decisive, gravitational. She's Tolui's widow, mother of Munka, Kublai, Hulagu, and Arik Buk. Her voice doesn't rise. The world leans in. She patronizes scholars as if knowledge were siegecraft, which it is. She teaches her sons languages. She teaches them patience. She teaches them that power is not loud. Power is inevitable. When you leave her presence, you check your pockets to see if she installed a long-term plan without telling you. She did. You'll discover it next decade. Then Turagain Khatun, Ögedei's widow, who becomes regent with knives tucked in her diplomacy. If Sorkoktani is gravity, Turagain is weather, moving systems, sudden storms, lightning audits. She navigates the politics of succession with an iron fan. She reminds every man who thought regency was a scenic rest stop that the road belongs to those who pave it. She is proof that in this dynasty, marriage is not a veil, it's a title deed. Let's get tactile again, because history is best smelled. Your boots are lined with sheep wool. Your hair carries smoke. Your mouth tastes like a fermented dare called kumis. Parchment crackles when you unroll it, a delicious prelude to someone else's fate. In winter, the air seizes your lungs and returns them with interest. In spring, the grass shakes like a crowd at a concert, horses in ecstatic attendance. In battle, the dust tastes like iron. In court, the tea tastes like secrets steeped too long. You wear jewelry that survived 3 dynasties and is only on loan to you because loyalty is graded in carats. You own 8 daggers, 3 sons, 1 nation, and a temporary lease on immortality. Not bad for a Tuesday. Edge cases? Plenty, and they prove the rule. First, the scandal of Jochi's paternity. Officially a non-issue, unofficially a loaded topic at family dinners. The rule of thumb was, call him son, then assign him Siberia and the steppes toward the sunset, and let results decide. Results decided. Second, the case of in-laws who forgot the program. A husband resists the summons to campaign, citing scheduling conflicts. The conflict is resolved when your father schedules cavalry. You send a fruit basket afterward. Third, the wild child cousins who think yassa is a suggestion. It's not. Their haircuts become instructive. And now, the absurdities. Rule of 3 addition. 1. A A wedding where each gift is a fortification, a gate, a tower, a bond price denominated in sheep. 2. A christening where the blessed water is actually bitter tea from a far country envoy who will later write poetry about your stare. 3. A funeral where the mourners are silent because the dead man left so many heirs that words would be redundant. The technical term might be ritual, but the practical term is boot camp. You do not cry without also allocating resources. How does it all actually feel? It feels like riding at dawn, the cold knifing your cheekbones, the world opening like a map you're about to rewrite. It feels like sitting in a tent with a ledger and a heartbeat that keeps time with the hoofbeats outside. It feels like the moment when a messenger arrives with news from the far west. Your brother's lines now rule from the Caspian to a place where the people worship in domes and eat spices that make your eyes water. You sip tea, breathe, and move a small carved horse on a board. Logistics, clipped through your fingers like prayer beads. But let's get to the wars, because if we don't, the cavalry will come through this paragraph personally. Jochi's heirs, Batu and the rest, become the thunderclap that rings over Rus's lands. The Golden Horde is less a name than a noise, the sound of hooves on frozen ground. Chagatai's lands lock the corridor that caravans dream of. Urgadai's tenure sees the big pushes into North China and beyond. A logistical miracle that would embarrass modern supply chains. 2-day delivery, scoffs a Mongol quartermaster. We did 2-continent delivery. Tolui's bloodline gives you Munka, who stabilizes, and Kublai, who invents a new performance art called Running China as a Step Prince, and Hulagu, who strolls into the heart of the Abbasid Caliphate and asks Baghdad whether it has considered remodeling. The answer is yes, involuntarily. Through all of this, daughters maintain corridors. They hold the passes where an empire breathes. They sit with local magnates and ask, in voices that are not questions, whether the roads will be safe this year. They allocate grain as if it were diplomacy, because it is. They permit temples to ring bells, mosques to call, monasteries to chant. They recommend priests to their own gods. Logistics, revenue, obedience. The offerings are wagons. Sex and marriage in this world are policy instruments, and the policy is scale. Was there tenderness? Certainly. Was there debauchery? Reportedly. But it's hard to distinguish debauchery from networking when everyone is armed. We know the sons had harems, the daughters had leverage, and the family had an uncanny ability to transform desire into alliance. Fetishes, if we must. Horses, ubiquitous. Falcons, obsessive. Metaphors, excessive. Affairs? Surely. In a civilization where tents could be raised and struck in an hour and privacy was a strong suggestion. Scandals erupt, settle, become watchwords. The step's most enduring kink is power shared between spouses who understand that survival is marital cooperation at geopolitical scale. Jealousies? Of course. Picture the Genghis yard, a chorus of siblings measuring their shadows against the steppe. You, as a daughter, resent that some chroniclers will remember your husband's name before yours. So you make sure anyone who deals with your court leaves pronouncing your name first. You, as a son, resent that your brother got a richer pasture, so you make sure the pastures no longer matter because you own cities now. Grudges become, treaties become trade routes. The family fights like a weather pattern, but the rain falls where the empire needs it. Design of everyday objects, because the prompt promised materials and shapes, and we are not cowards. Your saddle is a throne. It's wood and leather, high-backed, built for war and long meetings. Your bow is composite, horn, sinew, wood, glued with fish bladder and sheer confidence. When drawn, it sings the note called policy. Your tent is lattice-work genius, collapsible like a good argument. Your seal is carved jade or silver, an animal in motion, frozen at the moment of command. Your knives curve like editorial comments. Your clothing layers, silk for warmth, silk for arrows that sometimes slide instead of penetrate. The technical term is, please keep shooting. It's adorable. Your boots are shock absorbers for the empire. When you sit at a writing board, your brush tip is sable, and your ink cake is ground into a glistening pool that reflects your face and all its terrible competence. Mechanism of succession, you ask? Ah, the glorious non-system. Kurultai, grand councils, determine who gets to be Khan, provided the attendees aren't running late due to continental commitments, which they always are. It's the original board election, where the directors are also warlords and proxy. Voting involves actual proxies with lances. The daughters and daughters-in-law become kingmakers by logistics. They control who arrives when. A meeting that could have been a raid. No, this is a raid that doubles as a meeting. A brief tour of notable descendants, because you're here and the tea is hot. Kutulun, Urgadai's line, later cousin of Kublai, rides into legend as the wrestler princess who refuses to marry any man who can't throw her. Spoiler, they can't. She collects horses as dowry substitutes, 10,000 by some accounts, which is a love language the Mongols understand. She's a woman who turns suitors into livestock, and if that isn't a leadership seminar, what is? Munka, serious, consolidating, allergic to nonsense, brings a stern mercy to governance. Kublai, cosmopolitan, curious, half in love with Chinese bureaucracy, half allergic to losing, builds something new that annoys purists and delights accountants. Hulagu, storm at the Tigris, proves that the family can translate step velocity into sieges that end centuries. But always, back to the daughters. Without them, corridors collapse. With them, empires exhale. They are not footnotes, they are footbridges. In a tradition where practicality trumps prejudice, their power is not an aberration, it's a design principle. Think of them as product managers of conquest, shipping on time, under budget, with far fewer bugs than you'd expect from a company staffed entirely by murderous equestrians. Now, indulge me in a three-part riff, because rhythm demands it. 1. You are a son, and your curriculum is velocity, ride, raid, reconcile. You learn to read the land the way other people read texts. You judge a valley by the way sound sits in it. 2. You are a daughter, and your curriculum is gravity, hold, host, harvest. You learn to read people the way other people read weather. You judge a council by the way silence moves across it. 3. You are an in-law, and your curriculum is survival, smile, serve, stay. You learn to read the family the way other people read omens. You judge your prospects by the number of horses tied outside your tent at dawn. Edge case, addendum, because the empire is nothing if not extra. Occasionally, a daughter's husband dies inconveniently. Does she retire to embroidery? She does not. She continues to govern, a widow in armor. Another time, a son balks at orders and gets a remedial course in discipline that ends with his garrison asking for new leadership. Sometimes, an envoy writes a diary entry about your court and calls you gentle. You frame it. It's the funniest thing anyone's ever said. Was the family cruel? Absolutely. You don't plough the world and leave no furrows. But they also had rules. Strange, severe, sometimes humane. They allowed merchants air. They permitted worship. They punished theft more than blasphemy. They hated corruption because it slowed caravans. Your modern brain wants to put them in a category: hero, villain, startup founders. The answer is yes. The empire was a machine for making order from chaos and chaos from order, sometimes in the same afternoon. You're summoned to a kurultai, a meeting scheduled in an impossible valley at an impossible time. You bring your banners and your trust issues. The agenda, future of the empire. The time limit, before snow. Half the attendees arrive early because they are daughters who understand calendars. The other half arrive late because they are sons who understand sieges. Someone proposes a breakout session. Someone else proposes a breakthrough session, by which they mean a wall. It is, as always, a meeting that could have been a raid. You smile. You draft minutes. You annex a province while everyone argues about refreshments. Productivity achieved. Payoff time. What's the lesson buried beneath all the horsehair and fanfare? It's this. Genghis Khan's family turned kinship into infrastructure. Daughters became gates. Sons became roads. The empire did not survive on shock alone. It survived on the quiet, daily miracle of management, performed by people who were raised to believe geography was negotiable. The steppe birthed a system where power is a relay race, and the baton is a continent. If you feel dizzy, that's normal. It's not altitude sickness, it's scale. And because we promised practical details, here's how to be you, in their boots, for a day. You wake before dawn. You drink something that tastes like a dare and courage. You walk the perimeter of a camp that smells of leather and frost. You hear an argument at the far fire about a tax rate. You settle it with a combination of math and glare. You review an envoy's letter that radiates flattery like a stove radiates heat. You pencil in possible future puppet. You watch a horse being shod, thinking about treasury. You sit with a priest from a faith you do not share and fund his temple because stability is a sacrament. You receive a messenger who says your brother's campaign reached a river you traced on a map as a child. You send gifts. That afternoon you adjudicate a dispute between merchants whose combined wealth could feed a city for a season. You decide in favor of the one who doesn't annoy you and also happens to be right. At dusk, you draft 3 letters. One to your father that is all numbers. One to your husband that is all praise. One to your rival that is all knives wrapped in silk. You sleep and dream not of romance, but of roads. You wake to leather creaking and wind pulling at felt, and you do it again. Because empires are just routines with better scenery. Final absurdity trio before we land. A census where the enumerators move on horseback and count your soul by the number of tents your shadow covers. A postal system faster than gossip, staffed by riders who change horses like a gossip changes allegiances. A treasure hoard so large your accountants muscle up from lifting bars of silver the way athletes lift kettlebells. The technical term might be state capacity, but the practical term is, do not try to cheat the tolls. We own the tolls, the roads, the horizon, and the weather today. Now, breathe. Our story is a gallop, but endings require a walk. After Genghis, the family fans out like spokes from a burning hub. Lines harden into carnates. Wars of succession carve scars into maps. Daughters continue to hold gates until other gates open elsewhere. And history, that messy clerk, files their names under, we should talk about them more. The sons leave monuments of movement, treaties, cities, administrative systems that modern states still unwittingly imitate when they chase efficiency with ruthless cheer. You pull your cloak tighter. Somewhere, a falcon lands on a wrist. A blade slides into a sheath. A seal thumps wet wax. The air smells like first snow and last chances. Behind you, the tent flap stirs with the night's breath. Ahead, the world is a meeting that could have been a raid. And you, inconveniently, are both the agenda and the action items. Reflective outro, crisp and modern. In the end, Genghis Khan's children didn't just inherit an empire, they learned to schedule it. And if that sounds like your calendar tomorrow, maybe consider fewer meetings and more horses. For our second story tonight, you are Harun al-Rashid, caliph of the Abbasid Empire, theoretical shadow of God on earth, practical manager of complaints about drainage and pigeon theft. By day, you preside over a court so glittering that later storytellers will turn it into fairy tales. By night, you sneak out of the palace in a cheap cloak to see what people are saying about you behind your very expensively brocaded back. So basically, you are the original insecure celebrity, doom-scrolling the comments section, except the comments section is the entire city of Baghdad, and instead of scrolling, you are just walking. And instead of a burner account, you have an actual burner identity. This is our main question tonight, and you might as well pin it to your turban now. At what point does secretly walking the streets to check on my people cross the line into weird parasocial obsession with your own approval ratings? Because as we will see, you cross that line, repeatedly, with flair. Now, close your eyes. You are in Baghdad, in the later 8th century of our era, though of course no one around you calls it that. They call it the reign of Harun. May God lengthen his nights and shorten his paperwork. The air is warm and thick with the smell of charcoal, cumin, sweat, and the river that absolutely has things living in it that no one can pronounce. Lantern light floats in the alleys like sleepy stars at eye level. You hear metal workers hammering, a baker cursing at a lazy apprentice, a lute string snapping somewhere, followed by a creative burst of profanity that would make a camel blush. The city is new, engineered, an almost perfect circle like some cosmic diagram if the cosmos had zoning disputes. A conservative estimate, pulled directly from thin air, would be that every second person is shouting at someone, selling something, or praying very loudly about how broke they are. The methodology was robust. The people were not. In theory, you rule it all from the round city, behind walls, behind guards, behind velvet curtains, so heavy they probably have their own gravitational field. There are protocol manuals thicker than your arm, explaining who is allowed to blink in your presence and when. You possess palaces, harems, libraries, and more cushions than any lower back actually needs. And yet, a strictly non-scientific survey of your soul suggests that none of it feels real unless you are out here, anonymous, scuffing your sandals in the dust. Unless you are listening to some drunk weaver complain about the caliph being lazy and useless and probably unable to even manage a proper goat sacrifice, while you nod along, thinking, noted. Is this wise statesmanship, or just the medieval version of searching your name on social media at 3 a.m? Empirical evidence, also called vibes, implies both. Let us rewind a bit, because you did not begin your life sneaking around in alleys like a royal raccoon. You were born into power, into the Abbasid family, whose whole brand is, we overthrew the last guys, and we are never letting that happen to us. Inshallah. Scholars suggest you grew up in an atmosphere of dangerous luxury, gold vessels, rare perfumes, poets reciting epic verses about how amazing your relatives are, but also a quiet background hum of paranoia, like a lute string always slightly out of tune. Court politics in your house are not Game of Thrones. That would be an understatement. Court politics in your house are Game of Thrones remixed with corporate restructuring, a divorce court, and an especially tense holiday dinner. All happening simultaneously. There are viziers and generals and scholars and members of your extended family, all of whom are convinced they could do your job better than you, and some of whom are correct. Using the highly advanced method known as reading stuff, historians tell us that your early life involves campaigns against Byzantium, formal oaths of loyalty, and the not-so-minor detail that you become heir after your older brother's line is pushed aside. Controlled experiments were not, tragically, involved. What matters for tonight's walk, though, is this. You grow up learning that power is a performance. You sit on the throne. Everyone else pretends to believe that this is inevitable, eternal, and ordained. But you also know that the performance is fragile. The empire is huge, diverse, held together with faith, tax collectors, and threats. Somewhere out there, someone is planning a rebellion. Statistically, several someones. A longitudinal study, also known as watching this unfold in slow motion, will confirm that, yes, several someones do indeed try. So what do? You put on a cloak, you pull a hood over your head, you leave by the side door, and you go out to see for yourself. This is where the ritual begins. The technical term might be nocturnal inspection of the urban commons. The practical term is main character syndrome with extra steps. The standard protocol for one of your little adventures goes something like this. Step 1. Wait until the night has settled and the court has eaten itself into a stupor on lamb, honey pastries, and arguments over theology. Step 2. Summons your two usual accomplices, your friend Jafar the Barmakid and Masroor the executioner. Yes, you heard that correctly. Your besties are your top administrator and your professional head remover. This is not a personality red flag at all. Step 3. Everyone dresses down. No silks, no jewels, no banners. Just plain cloaks, a little dust, maybe a discreet knife or 3, because you are not stupid. Step 4. You slip through the city gates like any other man, except that if anything happens to you, the entire empire collapses into civil war. Preliminary findings indicate that this is, objectively, a terrible idea. But you do it anyway, because you are Harun al-Rashid, and you have decided that random fieldwork is part of the job description. Data collection methods are, at best, improvisational. Picture it. You are walking along the Tigris banks. The moon is high. The water looks like oiled silk poured over black stone. Somewhere nearby, a group of poets are arguing over whether wine or love causes more suffering. They have never paid taxes, obviously. You pass a cluster of fishermen drowsing beside their nets, the river smell clinging to them like an accusation. A dog barks. A lute plays the same 4 notes over and over because the musician only knows that much, but is very committed. And there you are, Caliph of Islam, commander of the faithful, currently tripping over a half-broken cobblestone and trying not to swear in a way that would give away your education. Now, later storytellers will turn this into the stuff of legends. They will say that you, disguised, rescued maidens from cruel merchants, exposed corrupt judges, rewarded the poor, punished the wicked, solved emotional crises with a combination of strict justice and spontaneous generosity. In those stories, you are essentially a mashup of Batman, Santa, and that one uncle who always has cash for ice cream. Based on extensive archival snooping, the truth is both less poetic and more entertaining. You do sometimes intervene heroically, yes. You also sometimes just stand around and complain about the price of dates. More than one source implies that your favorite activity is walking into people's houses under some flimsy pretext and listening in on their family drama like a one-man reality show. A conservative estimate, again pulled from thin air, is that at least 2/3 of Baghdad would absolutely loathe you if they knew how often you had eavesdropped on them while they thought they were alone. Here is where our running question comes back, tugging on your sleeve. Helpful ruler, or unethical subscriber to the premium gossip package. Take the case of the two brothers, famous in the stories. In the tale, you overhear a quarrel about inheritance, burst in like divine justice in sandals, solve the dispute, hand out gold, and deliver a lecture so moral that the furniture weeps. Scholars suggest that in real life, this probably looked more like you, Jafar, and Masrur hiding behind a screen while people shout, and then emerging at the least dignified moment. Empirical evidence, say the vibes, indicates that the caliph enjoyed drama. Let us talk about the setting again, because Baghdad is not just a backdrop, it is a co-conspirator. This is a city where you can walk from a perfumer's stall, drowning in rosewater and musk, straight into a tannery where leather hangs in strips and the smell is so aggressive it registers as a physical assault. Where booksellers debate the finer points of Aristotle, while a spice vendor next door is screaming at a customer about coriander. The streets under your feet are dusty in summer, muddy in winter, always littered with a fine sprinkling of donkey droppings, discarded fruit, and the occasional broken amphora. The shoes of the city are never truly clean, which is an excellent metaphor for its politics. A strictly non-scientific survey of your sandals suggests they have seen things. As you wander, you hear prayers called from mosques, the muezzin's voice bending through the night like smoke. You also hear laughter from courtyards, dice clattering on stone. The clink of cups in back alley taverns where wine technically does not exist because everyone pretends it does not. The same way everyone pretends the caliph does not occasionally walk by pretending to be someone else. Religion here is not some serene, abstract force. It is woven into contracts, judgments, insults, flirtations. Judges argue over the law. Theologians argue over whether those judges have souls. You, as caliph, are supposed to be the guardian of justice, the defender of orthodoxy, the guy who keeps both the Puritans and the hedonists sort of manageable. It is less spiritual leader and more cosmic middle manager. This is where the nightly walks serve a serious function. Official reports are useless. Every governor reports that crime is low, loyalty is high, and taxes are flowing like honey over warm bread. Peer review in this case means, my cousin agrees, you cannot trust it. But when you wander the city, cloaked, the truth comes out in the smell of fear, when tax collectors are mentioned, in the way people spit after saying a judge's name, in the tired slump of a laborer who mutters, the caliph does not care about us, while you are literally standing right there. Ouch. So you use what you hear. You fire corrupt officials. You reward honest ones. You decide which rebellious region gets troops and which one gets an ominous letter with your seal on it. A longitudinal study, again meaning this mess continues for years, suggests that these walks do keep you slightly more informed than your predecessors who never left their palaces except at heavily choreographed parades. But, and there is always a but, remember our running question. Where is the line between justice and obsession? Between governance and voyeurism? Because the stories also show you using your secret excursions not just to help people, but to test them. You love a moral trap. You will show up as a random stranger, ask for hospitality, and then quietly judge whether your host follows the laws of generosity. You will pretend to be poor, or rich, or lost, and calibrate your reward or punishment accordingly. This is less fair legal process and more reality show hosted by a god-backed monarch. All available data, plus some speculation, point to the conclusion that you enjoy this far too much. Imagine being one of your subjects. You are exhausted, you have children screaming, Your boss yelled at you. The price of bread went up again. And now 3 random men show up at your door asking for food. Do you invite them in? If you do, you might get rewarded with gold. Or, in reality, you get 3 grown men eating your supper and leaving some vague blessings behind. If you do not invite them in, maybe they are just freeloaders. Or maybe one of them is the caliph. And tomorrow your landlord mysteriously decides your rent is miscalculated and must be repaid with interest. Risk assessment under the Abbasids is a full-body sport. Let us pan the camera back for a moment and talk about your day job, because the nights only make sense against the glare of the daytime court. Harun al-Rashid is not just a character in stories. He is a ruler of a ridiculously wealthy empire. Trade routes thread through your lands like veins. Silk from the east, furs from the north, spices from the south, board Byzantine ambassadors from the west. Taxes flow into your treasury, which you then convert into architecture, patronage, and, occasionally, sensible expenditures like armies. Your court is a sensory overload. The carpets under your feet are so soft you feel like you are walking on the compressed dreams of 1,000 sheep. Musicians play in every corner. Scholars recite verses in Arabic, Persian, Greek, translating, debating, aggressively footnoting each other in person. Singers perform songs about love so intense that, were they accurate, your palace would be ankle-deep in tears. The perfumes are layered. Amber over musk, over rose, over the faint tang of sweat that no amount of incense can ever fully erase. And then there are the entertainments that do not age as gracefully. Your court, like all rich board courts, loves excess, drinking parties, poetry contests, serious theological debates that somehow end with people throwing cushions at each other. Rivalry between factions, each one insisting that their taste in music, philosophy, and curtain fabric represents the true spirit of Islam. In this environment, your own personality leans theatrical. You perform piety in public, perform generosity in spectacular bursts, and sometimes perform spite with equal flair. One historian claims that when you fall out with someone, you do not simply dismiss them. You orchestrate their fall like a tragic opera, with symbolism, witnesses, and lingering resentment. Subsequent research has confirmed that, yes, it gets worse. Enter the Barmakids, your favorite and then least favorite family of viziers. Jafar, your walking companion, is one of them. For years, the Barmakids run the empire's administration with terrifying competence. They oversee finances, manage provinces, sponsor scholars. In modern terms, they are that consultancy firm everyone uses, respects, and kind of hates. You, to all appearances, adore them. You trust them with everything from tax reform to your nightly sneaking out schedule. They are the lubricating oil in the creaky machinery of your state. And then, one night, you destroy them. Confiscation of property, executions, exile, the whole menu. Why? Scholars suggest various reasons: fear of their rising power, suspicion of disloyalty, religious pressures, some spectacular personal betrayal, or the simple fact that long-term functional relationships are banned in royal courts by divine law. Our sample size is 1, but it is a very confident one, and it says, Harun was not great at work-life boundaries. Here, your nightly walks turn dark. Did you hear rumors about the Barmakids on those streets? Did someone, over a cup of cheap wine, mutter that they were too rich, too independent, too beloved? Did that plant a seed in your mind, a little whisper that said, people love them more than you? Remember the running question: are you gathering information, or are you just feeding your own insecurities? Because power, as you experience it, is intensely personal. Religion gives you cosmic authority, but politics makes you an anxious human. You worry about rebellion, about betrayal, about whether your sons will tear each other apart when you die. Spoiler, they will. A longitudinal study of your dynasty shows a strong correlation between gifted sons and civil wars later, though again, controlled experiments were not, tragically, involved. And so you walk. You walk the alleys to see if people whisper the names of your rivals with more warmth than they whisper yours. You walk to reassure yourself that they still curse or praise you with sufficient intensity. Every insult overheard is a data point. Every praise song sung by a beggar is a tiny hit of dopamine. Welcome to caliphal governance, where policy and emotional validation come in the same cloak. Let us return to the sensory tour for a moment, because you are getting tense, and nothing calms the nerves like more smell descriptions. You pass through the market of booksellers. Shelves of parchment and papyrus crowd the narrow street. Ink stains the fingers of men arguing over grammar, philosophical treatises, and whether this new translation from Greek is pure genius or vile heresy. The air smells of leather bindings, dust, and ambition. You move on to the street of coppersmiths, where the clang of hammer on metal rings in your bones. Sparks jump. The air tastes like heated metal and sweat. You catch glimpses of polished bowls, lamps, basins, each reflecting fragments of your face under the hood. For one heartbeat, you see yourself multiplied: caliph, wanderer, judge, gossip, addict. In the alleys of weavers, loom beats thump like heartbeat drums. Threads stretch in every direction, bright as bird feathers. You brush past hanging textiles, their roughness against your fingers a reminder that your world is constructed, woven, never natural. A strictly non-scientific survey of your emotional state suggests mild existential dread. Meanwhile, back at the palace, your household continues its own dramas. Wives, concubines, children, tutors, eunuchs, servants, all woven into a dense social fabric that makes modern group chats look simple. Scholars suggest you father at least several sons and daughters. Chroniclers disagree on the exact number, partly because record keeping is spotty, and partly because they get bored partway through the list. Marriage, for you, is not romance. It is diplomacy, alliance, strategy. Concubines are luxury items, but they also produce heirs, which in your world is the ultimate status symbol. Love exists, but it must coexist with political usefulness and the constant background noise of suspicion. This is why you like the streets. Out here, nobody cares who your grandmother was, except as a punchline. Out here, people argue about dowries, about in-laws, about whether God hates them personally or just in a more general, policy-level way. You listen, and your own palace troubles feel both smaller and larger at once. You meet pious ascetics who refuse charity because they believe reliance on God must be pure. You meet drunk poets who accept charity, wine, and your cloak if you let them. You see both extremes of your religious order up close: the rigid, the ecstatic, the resentful, the hopeful. Religion in your city is loud. Sermons thunder from mosques, warning of sin, urging repentance, praising rulers when the stipend is correct, and condemning them when it is late. In your palace, legal scholars debate fine points of law while you pretend to follow and occasionally interject a question that may or may not reveal you have not done the reading. Using the highly advanced method known as reading stuff, they craft treatises that will echo for centuries. You contribute by nodding gravely and sometimes funding them. And then at night, You check whether any of that preaching has landed. Do people practice what your jurists insist upon? Do they fast, pray, avoid forbidden things? Or do they quietly reinterpret the rules to suit their circumstances, aided by those flexible creatures known as local custom and creative theology? Spoiler, mostly the second. As a caliph, you will continue to be surprised by this, even though you should not be. We need to talk about your temper, because it is a character in this story too. Sources portray you as mercurial. One day, you shower a poet with gold for a clever verse. Another day, you exile a musician because her song reminds you of someone who annoyed you. A non-peer-reviewed survey of your decisions suggests a strong correlation between your blood sugar level and imperial policy. Your nightly walks do not soften this side of you. Sometimes, hearing a story of injustice moves you to mercy. Sometimes it infuriates you. The same hidden man who can quietly give a purse of gold to a starving widow can also return to the palace and order the execution of an official whose face he simply finds smug. Is that justice? Is that paranoia? Our sample size once again says yes. Now, you might be wondering, how did these walks turn into the 1001 Nights, that vast labyrinth of tales full of genies, flying carpets, cursed lovers, and improbable plot twists? Here, the evidence gets fuzzy, which is historian code for nobody really knows and everyone is guessing elegantly. The tales of Harun walking the streets in disguise seem to begin as anecdotes. Moral exemplar, part of a genre where rulers are shown behaving wisely or foolishly to instruct listeners. Over time, storytellers attach more outrageous adventures to your name. Because branding, you become the default caliph for all weird urban legends. One day, a storyteller wants to make a point about generosity. So they say, once Harun al-Rashid went out at night. And then the story writes itself. Another day, someone wants to talk about betrayal, about loyalty, about fate. Again, Harun al-Rashid, and on it goes. A longitudinal study of these tales over the centuries shows a clear trend. Every generation adds more glitter, more scandal, more improbable coincidences. The methodology is robust, the facts are not. You, the real Harun, are somewhere under that glitter. You did rule a wealthy empire. You did preside over what later ages will call a golden age, though that term is mostly marketing and nostalgia. You did walk your city streets in disguise, partly out of piety, partly out of curiosity, partly out of a desire to control the narrative. And maybe, just maybe, you did occasionally help people in ways that deserve the legends. Picture one last walk. You are older now. Your beard is streaked with white. Your knees complain more than they used to. The world has shifted. Rebellions flare on the edges of your empire. Court factions sharpen their knives in the shadows of your pillars. You know, though you do not say it aloud, that your sons will fight over your throne. Still, you put on the cloak. Still, you call Jafar and Masrur, or whatever version of them history has left you with. You walk the same streets, though some houses have changed hands, some markets have moved, some alleys feel narrower, the smells are similar. The river still glides by, ignoring your reign entirely. You pass a group of children playing a game that involves stones, shouting, and extremely flexible rules. You pass a woman bargaining fiercely over the price of lentils. You pass a storyteller standing on a crate, spinning some half-remembered tale of a caliph who walked at night, who listened, who judged, who rewarded. The storyteller's hands move, drawing patterns in the air. The caliph in the story is wiser than you, kinder, more consistent, less petty. He always appears at the perfect moment, always makes the perfectly balanced judgment, always leaves the listeners satisfied. He is you, but upgraded, patched, and rebranded. You listen from the edge of the crowd, hood pulled low. For a heartbeat, you are just another face in the audience, breathing in smoke, dust, and the faint sweetness of dates. The people around you nod, laugh, sigh. They love this fictional caliph. He makes them feel that justice is possible, that someone out there sees their troubles and cares. And there it is, the answer to our running question, or at least one answer. Are you walking for power? Yes. For gossip? Also yes. For control, validation, paranoia? Absolutely. But you are also walking so that this story, or something like it, can exist. So that, centuries later, people will still be whispering about a ruler who left his throne to see his people face to face. So that the line between reality and fairy tale blurs, and in that blur people find comfort. All available data, plus some speculation, point to this final, inconvenient truth. The legend of Harun al-Rashid, the caliph of 1,001 nights, is better than the real man. More coherent, more generous, less messy. The methodology was robust. The humans were not. And yet the legend only exists because the real man, with all his insecurity, arrogance, curiosity, and occasional genuine compassion, chose to put on a cloak and walk into the night. So as you, Harun, step back toward the palace, feet sore, mind buzzing, cloak smelling faintly of river water and kebab smoke, remember this. History will not remember your budget meetings. It will barely remember your edicts. It will argue for centuries about your wars. But it will remember that you walked. In a world now where people watch their leaders through screens and comment threads, where rulers scroll instead of stroll, your nightly habit feels almost wholesome, in a deeply unsettling way. You did not just read the comments. You literally went out and listened to them, unfiltered, unmoderated, occasionally shouted into your face. A conservative estimate, pulled yet again from thin air, would be that this was both reckless and strangely admirable. And as the palace gates close behind you, as servants hurry forward, as guards snap to attention, as the weight of empire settles once more onto your shoulders, one last thought drifts through your mind like smoke rising from a brazier. Maybe tomorrow night you will walk again, not because you really need more data, but because, inconveniently, you like it. So here is the part nobody tells you in the glittered-up fairy tale version. Sneaking through Baghdad at night is not just noble surveillance. It is also your coping mechanism. You know that feeling when you close your palace door, the noise of court falls away, and you are left alone with your thoughts, which, frankly, no one has vetted for quality. That is you, Harun, after a day of petitions, legal disputes, and an argument between two scholars about how many angels can sit on the back of a legal opinion without violating precedent. This is when the itch starts. You are supposed to go to bed, say your prayers, lie down on linens that cost more than an entire village, and drift off while eunuchs fan you gently and the perfume burners whisper smoke into the darkness. Instead, your mind starts listing possibilities. What if the judges are lying to you? What if the taxpayers are lying to you? What if the poets are lying to you, which is at least their job, but still? What if, right now, in some alley, someone is telling a story about you that makes you look ridiculous? And there it is again, the running gag that unfortunately is just your personality. You cannot stand not knowing what people are saying about you out there. You are a caliph. Yes. You are also one long, continuous search query of your own name. So you fall back on your favorite ritual, the sanctioned behavior known as the cloak and walk. You could call it informal urban reconnaissance, but really it is, I am going stir crazy and I need to go hear unsupervised civilians complain. Tonight, you tell yourself, will be different. Tonight, you are not walking for gossip or validation or the thrill of being secretly important. No, tonight is serious. There are rumors of unrest, soldiers grumbling over pay, merchants complaining about tariffs, scholars whispering that you favor the wrong theologians. You want to know how bad it is. You slip out again, your feet learning the rhythm of this escape. Stone corridor, quiet gate, shadowed street. The city opens around you like a fan. You move toward the poorer quarters, where homes are packed tight, where walls lean together as if sharing secrets. The air is warmer here, thicker with cooking smoke, bodies, and the sour tang of cheap wine that officially does not exist. Children dart between doorways like small, badly supervised comets. Somewhere, a couple argues at a volume that suggests they are trying to reach God directly. You listen, and what you hear is not a revolution brewing in each alley. It is something worse for your ego and better for your reign. Most people are not thinking about you at all. They are thinking about bread and rent and why their cousin is an idiot and how to get a better stall in the market. If you appear in their conversation, it is as a distant force that sometimes raises taxes and sometimes sends soldiers. You are weather. You are bureaucracy. You are not the main character in their stories, except when things go very wrong. A strictly non-scientific survey of these conversations suggests that your centrality to the universe has been greatly exaggerated in your own mind. Does this calm you? Of course not. Instead, it creates a new obsession. If you are not always on their lips, then you must work even harder to shape the moments when you do appear. You must make sure that when they do talk about you, they say, "He is just, he listens, he helps, he appears at night and fixes things." And that is how you become an urban legend while still alive. You begin to choreograph your interventions more carefully. If you hear of a cruel official, you do not just remove him quietly. You orchestrate a little drama. You appear disguised, witness his abuse, reveal yourself at the last possible moment, and punish him so spectacularly that the storytellers will have a field day. Controlled experiments were not, tragically, involved, but anecdotal reports from terrified functionaries indicate morale among the corrupt drops sharply. At the same time, you perform generosity with equal theatrical flair. You hear of a widow whose son cannot pay his debts, and instead of simply sending money through an intermediary like a normal, emotionally balanced person, you show up in the night, argue a bit, let her insist she cannot take charity, push back, and then, when at last she accepts, you reveal your identity like some divine twist ending. Theology calls this charity. Drama studies calls it needing the applause. Let us be fair. Your urge to stage manage is not purely narcissistic. It is also strategic. In a world where news travels by gossip and story, you are essentially doing content marketing. You want every tea stall, bathhouse, and caravan to buzz with tales of the caliph who sees, hears, and acts. Every such tale is a little deposit in the bank of legitimacy. And some part of you, the part that still remembers being a younger prince, watching older men decide fates in rooms full of stale incense, genuinely believes this is what a good ruler does. Using the highly advanced method known as reading stuff, you have absorbed enough history to know that rulers who ignore their cities usually end badly. So you walk, so you listen, so you intervene. Let us zoom in on one particularly bizarre evening, because a case study always helps. You have heard, through a chain of reports that would make any auditor weep, that certain wealthy men in the city have taken to hosting extremely questionable parties. There is music, there is wine, there are performers of ambiguous occupation, there is poetry that does not pass any decent morality filter. For the pious jurists, this is the end of civilization. For you, it is Thursday. However, you are curious. You want to know who is there, what is said, how far people are willing to go when they think the caliph is not watching. So, naturally, you decide to attend. Not as the caliph, of course, as an anonymous gentleman of means, with 2 friends and 1 executioner. You slip into the house under cover of darkness. The courtyard is lit by dozens of oil lamps, their flames making the shadows dance. Cushions are scattered about, and the guests lie around them in that particular posture of people who have been lying around them for quite some time. The air smells of wine, roasted meat, sweat, and regret. Poets recite verses of truly impressive filthiness, rhyming body parts in ways that may technically qualify as advanced mathematics. Musicians play tunes that sound like they were composed specifically to make elders frown. In a corner, someone has fallen asleep on a tray of dates. You, cloaked, watch. Here is where the real moral test unfolds, not of them, but of you. Because, as caliph, you can close this place in an instant. You can imprison every man here, flog them, fine them, or make them listen to dull sermons until they beg for physical punishment. You can use them as an example, a warning, a research sample in your longitudinal study of public sin and its consequences. Or you can simply observe that, in a city this large, with this much pressure, people are going to blow off steam somewhere, somehow, with someone's unfortunate poetry, and that a little hypocrisy is the grease that keeps society moving. What do? Sources, depressingly, disagree. Some say you crack down. Others say you shrug and leave, muttering about human nature. A strictly non-scientific reading of your personality suggests that you probably did both, in different moods. Some nights, you were merciful. Other nights, you were the wrath of God in a borrowed cloak. This inconsistency is not just your personal flaw. It is the flaw of your entire era. Law is developing, institutions are forming, but so much still depends on who you are, what you ate, what dream you had the night before, and whether anyone annoyed you at breakfast. The methodology of justice is still, tragically, vibes. Now, outside of Baghdad, your fame grows as well. Messengers ride back and forth between your court and distant rulers. The most famous foreign episode pinned to your name is the exchange with the Frankish king, the one later called Charlemagne. According to the sources, you send magnificent gifts, a clock of mechanical marvel that chimes and drops little metal balls, fine fabrics, exotic animals. He sends you things as well, although your sources, written by your own people, are careful to emphasize that your gifts are far superior. Peer review in this case means everyone nods because you are paying them. For you, this diplomatic theatre is another form of nighttime walk, but on a global scale, you are testing how far your reputation reaches. Does your name carry awe in distant courts? Do they tremble a little when they hear of the caliph who commands armies, trade, and, rumor has it, reality-bending storytellers? In a world without satellites, without live feeds, without instant fact-checking, reputation is everything. A conservative estimate, pulled directly from thin air, is that half of your foreign policy is just well-staged stories about what you might do if annoyed. You cultivate this carefully. You make sure that the embassies sent to your court see the full spectacle, the rows of guards, the glittering audience hall, the sheer quantity of people whose entire job is to hand you things and then stand back dramatically. You also make sure they hear the stories of your nighttime walks. Somewhere over dessert, someone will mention, very casually, of course, our caliph knows his people. He goes among them himself. The implication is clear. You are not just powerful, you are plugged in. You have the medieval equivalent of real-time data. Even if, in reality, your data collection methods involve eavesdropping behind poorly built walls. Speaking of data, we must finally address the other side of night in your palace. The knowledge projects. Yes, you like drama and parties and occasionally behaving like a dangerously bored deity. But you also preside over a court that pours money into translation, scholarship, and what we now call science. During your reign and those of your near successors, the institution later called the House of Wisdom takes shape. Imagine this. By day, you approve budgets that pay scholars to translate Greek, Persian, and Indian works into Arabic. Philosophers, mathematicians, physicians, astronomers all crowd into a growing network of libraries and study halls, arguing about the nature of the cosmos and also about who misplaced that one manuscript. By night, when you walk the streets, little hints of this intellectual ferment reach you. You hear a student in a tea stall trying to explain geometry to a friend using dates and cups. You pass a courtyard where someone has set up an astrolabe and is explaining to curious onlookers how to measure the height of the stars. You catch a snatch of conversation about medicine, about new techniques for surgery, about herbs brought from distant lands. You realize, perhaps slowly, that your empire's power is not just in soldiers and gold. It is in this, the movement of ideas through the bloodstream of the city. A longitudinal study of civilizations, also known as looking at who collapses and who does not, suggests that states which invest in knowledge last longer than pure war machines. You are no modern policy analyst, but you have instincts. So you keep funding the scholars even when their books give jurists indigestion. Here, the contrast between palace and street becomes fascinating. In the palace, knowledge is formal, sanctified, recorded. On the street, it is messy, improvised, woven into daily life. A midwife learns from her mother, who learned from her mother. A metalworker experiments with alloys because something went wrong in the furnace, and he is not about to waste the accident. A navigator glances at the stars, mutters, adjusts his course by a thumb's breadth. You, walking through this ecology of practice, are like a very high-level, very confused field researcher. All available data, plus some speculation, point to the conclusion that you sense something vital here, even if you cannot articulate it. The city itself is thinking. And you, most exalted ruler, are just one neuron firing in it. This is an uncomfortable thought. So you do what all-powerful people do when faced with the possibility that the world does not revolve around them. You throw money at the parts that flatter you and ignore the parts that do not. You endow scholars who dedicate books to you. You build mosques where your name is inscribed on plaques. You sponsor public works with your seal carved on them in stone. You make your presence as concrete as possible because you cannot bear the idea of being only a rumor. Yet for all that, the version of you that survives best is the rumor. Centuries later, when the palaces have fallen, when the plaques have worn thin, when the bureaucracy you tormented has been replaced by newer, equally unhappy clerks, your legend wanders on. Harun al-Rashid, who walked by night. Harun al-Rashid, who tested the hearts of men. Harun al-Rashid, who turned up at the exact moment a plot needed a twist. The storytellers will attach you to love stories, crime stories, ghost stories. In some tales, you are wise. In others, foolish. In many, you are both, in rapid succession. A strictly non-scientific survey of those tales suggests that you serve as a convenient narrative hinge. If the caliph appears, something big is about to happen. And what of you, listening now, perhaps stretched out in your bed, or hunched over your screen, or walking through your own city at night with headphones on? Where do you fit into this? Here is the uncomfortable, delightful answer. You are doing the same thing. You scroll through news feeds, comment sections, videos, trying to get a sense of what people are thinking. You tell yourself it is research, that you want to be informed, that you are gauging the mood of the public. Empirical evidence, also known as the state of your sleep schedule, implies that you are also just addicted to knowing what they are saying about everything. Harun had sandals and alleys. You have notifications and endless scroll. The technology is different. The itch is the same. He put on a cloak. You put on anonymity. He listened at doors. You lurk in threads. He felt powerful and ridiculous at once. So do you. If there is a moral here, it is not the tidy fairy tale one about benevolent rulers and grateful subjects. It is something sharper and therefore more useful. Power, whether imperial or digital, does not actually cure insecurity. It just gives it better toys. Harun al-Rashid commanded armies, minted coins, presided over scholars, loved, punished, forgave. He could order the fate of thousands with a phrase. And still, at night, he needed to hear a random baker rant about taxes to feel like he knew what was going on. You, with far less at stake, do the same thing when you refresh your feeds to see if anyone has reacted to your latest joke, post, project, or meticulously curated photograph of lunch. A conservative estimate, pulled one last time from thin air, would be that this is simply a human thing. The methodology is not robust. The people are even less so. So if you find yourself walking your own version of Baghdad at night, real or digital, ears pricked for some mention of yourself, remember the caliph in his worn cloak. Remember that the legendary caliph of 1001 Nights was, under the embroidery, just a man who could not stop asking the same old question. What are they saying about me? The difference is that your wanderings will not spawn epic tales told across centuries. His did, not because he was better or worse, but because his walks happened to intersect with a culture that loved stories and a tradition that loved to embroider them. Based on extensive archival snooping and a strictly non-scientific survey of humanity, here is the final, dry little conclusion. The past is full of people trying to manage their image, spy on their own reputation, and control the narrative. The only real upgrade now is the speed. So, as you step back into your own metaphorical palace tonight, shutting the door on whatever comments, opinions, and gossip you have been swimming in, you can give a brief nod, perhaps, to Harun al-Rashid. He walked the streets of Baghdad in disguise, hoping to hear the truth. You walk through streams of data, hoping for the same. And if the truth is messy, contradictory, occasionally insulting, and often not about you at all, well, welcome to the human condition, commander of your own tiny flickering feed. Because at the end of the day, or rather at the beginning of the night, you, Harun al-Rashid, most powerful man in the Muslim world, are just another human trying to answer the oldest question in governance and gossip alike. What are they saying about me out there? And history, with a dry little smile, will reply, "Oh, everything.